Hello, hello. Have you missed my little jazz fingers as I say hello to you when the recording hits? Let's see if I can find my words today. Happy New Year. This is the first video here in the community in the new year, and I am pretty excited about it, as I am excited about every video that I do. But today is a particularly fun one, and again, every time I do one of these videos, I think to myself, why haven't I done this one before? But that's no matter. Here I am. We're going to do it today. And I think this is going to be a really great one, especially to start off the new year, because this is something that each of us struggle with. And even if you don't know you're struggling with it, you might just be struggling with it. And this video alone could bring some of the awareness to what is going on and how to manage it effectively. And now, before I say any of this and before I get into the video, I just want to validate the fact that there is nothing wrong with you. If you are struggling with this right now and you're thinking to yourself like, oh, why do I do this to myself? This happens every time. Like, why can't I get it together? And you're really in sort of that shame spiral. See what I did there? Spiral. I want to validate the experience, because until you know what's happening, until you can recognize and understand what's going on in the brain, how it plays into this, what's going on and why it happens and how to deal with it, you're kind of just out there thinking that you're the problem, when in reality, there's a lot of different factors at play here. So I want to dive into this right away. We are talking about how to manage a brain spiral, or conquering the brain spiral. And when I'm talking about a spiral in this particular instance, what I'm talking about is almost this idea of like one thought leading to another thought, leading to another thought. And it typically starts with a fear-based thought or an anxiety-based thought that just takes you on a tailspin. And I will give you an example of this, because I had a moment of this just myself. And this is what I'm always saying. Even though I am a therapist, I'm a licensed therapist, I've been doing therapy for years, I'm educated in the world of therapy, these things still happen to me. It happens to the best of us. So my example of my thought process and my thought spiral is even today. Obviously, this is the first video I've done in a really long time, the first video of the new year. So there's some unnecessary pressure there that obviously I put on myself. But what happened even for me this morning is I woke up and I opened my eyes and was like, oh my gosh, I have to do a video today. And then it's like, okay, I got to do a video today. And I'm trying to be positive and excited about it. Obviously, this is something I'm passionate about and I like to do. But then the thought spiral starts to take over. Well, what if the video is crap? What if you don't know what you're talking about? What if it ends up being garbage? What if you trip all over your words? What if nobody likes it? What if nobody watches it? What if no one watches any of your videos again? If nobody watches any of your videos again, why are you making videos in the first place? And this is what tends to happen, where one small fear-based or anxious thought spirals you into a million other thoughts. It becomes almost like an avalanche where you can't even deal with the weight of the amount of anxieties and worries and concerns and fears that are coming your way. It just landslides you. And when that landslide happens, you really find yourself in a period of overwhelm and anxiousness, even further anxiousness, because you're like, now you're anxious about being overly anxious. And it just really can take its toll on you mentally, emotionally, physically even, because when you find yourself in that state, what tends to happen is you're immediately entered into fight, flight, or freeze, which is a survival mode, which your body and your brain is actually built in to protect you from lions and tigers and bears. But that was a million years ago. That's not necessarily true now. But this is the way the brain works and the body works. So you are literally in a state of fight, flight, or freeze. There's no tapping into logic at that point, which is why it's so crucial and why this video is so important, and how to start to identify when you're entering into a spiral, so you don't get to the point where you're feeling the weight of the avalanche and it becomes more and more difficult to break yourself out of that spiral and tap into what is actually real, what is true, and what are true threats. Because remember, and this is a really great place to start, fear-based thinking or anxiety-based thinking or catastrophic thinking. If you don't know what catastrophic thinking is, it's a very like jargony term in the therapist world. It's essentially where you think everything is problematic and you make, and this is going to sound horrible, and many of you might be triggered by this because you've heard it your whole life, where a mountain, where a molehill becomes a mountain, where you have no ability to say, okay, this fear is not grounded in anything. It just becomes like 0 to big fear, I can't manage it. So that's what's important here, and knowing that so many of these fear-based thoughts are rooted in catastrophic thinking, and that's what tends to tip off the spiral. And oftentimes when that avalanche of like anxious thoughts and all these anxieties come on and all these spiralic thoughts come on and you can't manage them, normally it can be traced back to like one single thing, but we're gonna get there. And like I said, the importance of this, and the reason I want to share this information, this knowledge and wisdom with you, is because I want you to be able to build an awareness for yourself and get to know yourself personally, so you can understand when you're on the precipice or on the brink of having catastrophic thoughts, or your thoughts are going to begin to spiral, so that you know yourself personally. Okay, I'm starting to feel this come on. I need to take action and find ways to ground myself before this becomes so big that, you know, many hours have passed by and I am really in a state of high anxiety. My nervous system is through the roof. Like, it's just on fire and I am having difficulties calming down. And I know for me, before I started my therapy journey, before I went through all of my own journey, as I can say journey twice, I really struggled with this, where this sort of thinking pattern, these sort of sporadic thoughts would take me out for days. And I don't want the same for you, which is why I want to share some of this knowledge and why I want to share some of this wisdom with you, so that you can start to learn how to manage it earlier than I did, right? So here's why we have to understand and where we have to start. And we really have to start with the brain. And I know I mentioned this a little while earlier. Our brains were made to be able to protect us. Obviously, when we were cavemen, back in the caveman days, and I've told this story many, many times before, so if you've heard it, just bear with me. I'll get to the good stuff shortly. Back in those days, we had to rely on our instincts. We had to rely on our brains. We had to be prepared if something like a lion was around the corner. We needed to be at the ready. So we were consistently on edge, always on edge. And our brain had to keep us on edge, because if we weren't able to flee, we would perish, obviously. But what has happened is that our brain is still stuck in that time zone. It is still stuck in those caveman days. It really hasn't evolved the way the rest of us has evolved. It's really continued to be what it was in the very, very beginning of humankind. And I think that's an important fact to understand and to realize right up front, because it's going to validate, again, that there's nothing wrong with you. And this is something that a lot of us experience, right? So that's kind of the key there, is to know that this is always going to be a protective strategy. And this is going to help you not shame yourself. Obviously, if you're struggling with sporadic thoughts, if you're struggling with anxiousness, catastrophic thinking, any of these things, negative thought patterns, is that knowing and understanding that this is not just a you problem, that you are not broken, that there is nothing wrong with you, that we just have to understand the mechanics of the brain so that we can actually effectively manage some of these things as they come up. So I want you to just take a breath and just put your hand on your heart and say, there's nothing wrong with me. If I'm struggling with this right now, there's nothing wrong with me. I just need to learn a few things to be able to support my brain to manage what is happening, because this just wants to protect you. But unfortunately, this is always going to go to worst case scenario, if you've ever noticed. And that's where catastrophic thinking comes from, is because the brain goes into protection mode. And in order to protect you to the best of its ability from the foreseeable lions and tigers and bears, oh my, it needs to consistently think about worst case scenario. What is going to happen in the worst case scenario? If I can figure out what all the worst case scenarios are, then I know I can effectively manage them and I can come up with solutions for everything, right? That's its number one function, which is why it's so easy to find ourselves in some of these thought spirals, because essentially it's your brain coming up with every possible worst case scenario that it can think of to be able to support you when you need it, which is beautiful if you think about it. So I just want everyone to like thank their little brain and just say, thank you. I know you're trying to protect me, and validate the experience, because again, and I can't say this enough, there's nothing wrong with you. You are not broken. You are in a process of learning. That's what this community is all about. Redefining, rediscovering, realigning, and relearning what it means to be you, and understanding your inner mechanics so that you can better yourself and take yourself to the next step and be able to rock your way through some of the sporadic thoughts. And again, it's this real trigger, and it tends to be like one thing that sets you off. Let's take my example today about having some anxiety about coming back on video and coming back on camera. And as I can see now, like, I'm very relaxed now. Things are great. Things are fine. But if we think about what was the trigger of this? What is the root of this sporadic thought? Because it's obviously not the video. I've done hundreds of videos. I know that it's going to be fine. I have evidence to suggest that I am going to be fine. So what's at the root of this? Let's dig a little bit deeper. And that's something I want to encourage you to do. Why am I having all of these sporadic thoughts? Why am I feeling like the weight of the world with my video? And then I'm thinking, oh, if my video fails, then I'm going to fail, and then business is going to fail, and everything's going to blow up, and then I'm going to be, I'm going to be just this person that didn't do it right. And this is how serious these sporadic thoughts can be if you're not able to kind of pull yourself out of them right away. But if you look at the root of that, for me personally, it's always a fear of failure, of letting other people down. And that's what's at the very root of it. And this is what's important when you're managing thought spirals, is to really ask yourself the question, okay, what's at the root of this? what is going on here? Why am I having this big thought spiral? What's at the root? And if you can bring it back to the root and understand that origin or the spark, what is the spark that lit this flame that caused this avalanche of anxiety and catastrophic thinking and all of these things? What is causing this spiral and what's at the root of it? And if you can understand what's at the root of it, then it's a lot easier to manage, because then you're not managing like this thought about people rejecting my video in my case, or this thought about nobody watching, or this thought about everything falling apart. Then you can come right to the root and say, okay, I'm really scared that I'm going to let people down, or I'm really scared that I'm going to fail. And then it's one thing you're managing, and you can start to unpack that story. And this takes a little bit of work, like unpacking some of your storyline, some of your thought patterns, some of your programming, learned behavior. It takes building this awareness around what some of the root is. And I've dealt with this fear of failure and letting people down my whole life. It's a consistent thing that I'm always managing and dealing with. And if I'm not careful, it can really throw me for a loop. So knowing, okay, I have a real fear of failure. Where did this story come from? Where did this start? When do I first recall feeling a fear of failure or letting people down? What's at the root of this? And then exploring that from there. Okay. And it could be a multitude of experiences. I'm not going to make this whole video about me, but you can see where you can start to understand, okay, personally, I have this story about failure. This came from because let's say, for example, my dad was always really hard on me and he put a lot of pressure on me in school. And this is actually true. I had to have a conversation with my dad about this actually, and saying, listen, like, I understand that you want the best for me, but trying to drive perfection is really taking its toll on me. And I think as well too, it's like, there's also always an element of supposed to culture here, and understanding that failure, think about school even. In school, failing is bad. It's bad. It's to be avoided at all costs. If you fail, everybody's going to know. You are not okay. There is something wrong with you. You know, there's something physically or wrong with your brain that you can't pick this stuff up with. It's driven into us, and it's actually built into us and conditioned into us to fear failure, even from a young age, as soon as we enter the school system. And it's because of the way the school system is entered. And then again, it could be this pressure from your family or from your parents. You have to do well. You have to get an A. You have to, and if it's not an A, then it's not a good enough mark. And, comments like, where's the other 5%? Or where's the other 1%? Or if you got 99, why didn't you get 100, right? So it's this intense fear of failure from all different facets of life, from supposed to culture, from your family, from your culture, from wherever the case may be. And that is at the root of that. This is what's at the root. So that when you have a moment of anxiety, or when you have a moment of fear about failure at all, that it brings about the spiral of many, many, many other things. And the brain is so good that you might be able to find yourself coming out of the spiral and saying, it's okay, and providing yourself with evidence that this is not the case, where it could be like, okay, well, this isn't working. I need to continue to protect her. So let's throw some other things in there. What about that test you failed back when you were in high school? See, you are a failure, and then you go, oh my God, you're right. I am a failure. I was a failure at that point. And even though you're trying to get yourself out of the spiral, the brain's just going to start throwing spaghetti at the wall to see whatever fits. Then if none of those things are working, then it will throw other things at you and be like, well, what about that bump you found on your elbow? And that has nothing to do with anything. But then you're in that rumination field. You're right. I did have a bump on my elbow. And then the spiral takes itself in a whole new direction. Like, I had a bump on my elbow and I looked on WebMD, and WebMD said it could be a tumor. And what if I have a tumor? What's going to happen to my family? Who's going to take care of my kids? Like, what am I going to do? Who's going to help my partner? Like, what's going to happen with my family? And you can see 2 minutes ago, you were worried of having a fear of failure or a fear of presentation. And now you've moved on to something completely different. And this is what happens with these catastrophic thinking, is it just dumps on you. It dumps on you and it throws whatever it can. But again, remembering this is a protective strategy that is being adopted by your brain in order to help you is something that can really validate the experience and take away that aspect of, oh, there's something wrong with me here. There's something wrong with me here. And that's how we start to manage some of these sporadic thoughts. The first part being not shaming yourself. That's like tip number 1. Thumbs up. Tip number 1, be mindful not to shame yourself, because this is something that happens to all of us. It is literally built into who we are, the fabric of our DNA, evolutionarily speaking, physiologically speaking, all of these things, it's built into us. So knowing there is nothing wrong with me, I am experiencing a moment of sporadic thoughts and catastrophic thinking, I'm going to be okay. And that goes into number 2, and it's building personal awareness about when this is starting. This is crucial. You have to understand and be able to tell what this feels like. What does it feel like when these sporadic thoughts are starting to come on? And it might just start with, and if you know yourself enough to know, and if you're watching this video, you're like, I tend to really struggle with that. Pay attention the next time. See if you can feel what it feels like in your body. Understand if you're starting to get messages from your body. Are you starting to get pressure on your chest? Are your hands starting to sweat? Are you like shaking, or, you know, some people like start to, you can't see it obviously, but your knee starts to shake, or you start to, you know, twitch a little bit in your body, or heat comes all over you. Notice the physical aspect of what starts to happen before this starts. And it can be difficult to tap into, but I'm telling you, having this awareness is going to support you as you're going through this process, right? So, and it's got to be personal. Just because your friend feels weight on her chest doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen to you. So it's really, really, really important for you to do some internal work and understand what that looks like. Because if you can feel the physical aspect coming on, if you can feel it in your body first, it's going to allow you to be like, okay, I need to adopt some coping strategies and put some grounding, you know, I need to put some grounding into place here before this starts to get away with me. So understanding how your body reacts, not shaming yourself, and then having an awareness of when it's happening. This is probably the trickiest one of it all, because if that spiral starts and you are in it, it's going to be a lot more difficult to pull yourself out. So at the first sign of I'm having one thought building on another, building on another, building on another, I'm starting to have that avalanche, taking a moment of pause. A moment of pause is going to be your best friend here. And asking yourself, because remember, all of these is going to start with a fear-based thought or an anxious thought. And just asking yourself, is there anything to fear right now? Is there anything to fear right now? Is this threat real? And just asking yourself some of those questions and taking a moment of pause, taking a moment to put your hand on your heart and do some breathing. People roll their eyes at me when I say deep breathing, but I am telling you, it works. It really does, to just take some of those cleansing breaths. It's going to help your nervous system to remain calm. And if you can tap into calm before the spiral starts, you're going to be more effective in managing any negative thoughts that come your way, and you're going to be able to challenge them. And that's the key here too. As some of those thoughts come up, the fear-based thoughts that want to take you into the spiral, as they begin to come up, and you become more proficient in this. If you can practice your state of calm, and yes, being in a state of calm is actually practice, because think about it, in our society, we are conditioned to be in a state of stress consistently. Ask yourself, when was the last time I was really calm? It's probably been a while. Practice your calm. If you can bring yourself into a state of rest, you're going to be much more well equipped to deal with this as it comes on. But again, this takes practice. It's not just going to happen overnight. It's not just going to come overnight. It's going to take practice. So practicing your calm, providing some evidence as the negative thoughts come up. So if I go back to my own example of, oh my gosh, what if my video is a failure? Coming back and saying, Denise, it's okay. I'm in a state of calm. It's okay if your video is a failure. A lot of them have been successes. People have given you great feedback that it's been helpful for them. It's going to be okay. Oh, what if you mess up in the video? It's okay if you mess up in the video. You are a human being. It makes you relatable. It's okay. You always bounce back, you know? And if as another one comes on, just continuing to softly and be gentle with this. Be gentle with yourself. You don't want to be yelling at yourself, because that's going to put you in more of a state of fight, flight, or freeze. So being gentle with those responses, trying to go back to calm, bringing yourself back to calm, building that awareness. I'm going into a spiral, being gentle, right? So, and continuing to provide evidence. That's not the case. That's not true. There's no real threat here. You're going to be okay. Continuing to validate that experience. And if you find yourself in a real spiral, if you've missed the cues, that's okay, because this takes practice. It's like building muscle memory, and it's happening, and you notice midway and you are having trouble tapping into your calm, I want you to get up from the stew spot, because what tends to happen is we are in a spot and we're just staring at the wall, and it's like one existential thought after another, and it's like a real thing of dread, and you can't get out of it, or you're doom scrolling and your brain's going a mile a minute and you're literally just stuck almost in a freeze response. I want you to try your hardest. I call this the stew spot. Try your hardest to get up. Stand up even. Don't even put pressure on yourself. Don't even say, oh, I'm going to go unload the dishwasher to try and get my mind off things, or I'm going to get out of the house, or I'm going to go take a walk. I want you to simply stand, being step one. I want you to stand up. I want you to start taking a few steps. Start taking a few steps. Walk a little bit around your area. Take yourself out of the room you're in. Walk into another space. And remove yourself from that place that's caught you in the spiral, because then that place becomes part of the spiral itself. I mean, you're fixated on it and you're frozen in time, and you want to get your body up and moving a little bit and get it out of that space. And oftentimes, if you can get yourself up and you can get yourself out, you can move and you can tap into more logic there once you're out of that stew spot. Another thing that's very helpful is to write down some of the things that you're saying to yourself. And I know, again, this is one of those things that people tend to roll their eyes at me for, but writing things down takes their power away, because in here, things feel very, very real, especially if you're dealing with fear of failure or medical fear, all these things. It's really real here. It is 100% real. No matter how illogical it is, there's no telling this that it's illogical. So to be able to write it down, I am having a fear that I am going to be a failure. I am having a fear that everything's going to come crashing down. I am having a fear that people are going to be mad at me and I'm going to let people down. If you could write those things down, it takes their power away, because then you can look at them and you can see things more logically as you see the written word, and you can provide yourself with more evidence. If you can write even one down and provide a statement that suggests otherwise, you're already starting the process. So keep some of these things in mind. And if you're someone that, does any sort of yoga, grounding work, meditation, deep breathing even, it doesn't have to be anything formal. I know a lot of people get bent up. That's not right. See, I'm mixing up my words. Who cares? People get fixated on, I can't meditate, I can't turn my brain off. And I always say to people when they say this to me, you're not meant to turn your brain off. If you turn your brain off, you're not with us anymore, and that's not the goal. The goal is to practice non-attachment to the thought, is to understand and see the thought and not fixate on it. So practicing some of that meditation. If you're interested in meditation, I would highly recommend starting small, 30 seconds, 3 minutes. Don't go to say, oh, I'm going to start meditating today and pick an hour meditation on YouTube. You're not really setting yourself up for success. But if you can practice things like mindfulness and, small meditations, breathing even, taking deep breaths, holding and releasing. Even if you can practice that, it's going to really, really support you in finding your source of calm. And if you can find your source of calm, it allows you to manage those spirals a little bit better. But please, as you know, this is going to take practice, and that's okay. That's what we're here for. Rediscovering who we are, realigning with who we are, redefining who we are. It's got to start with understanding where we're at right now and being okay with it. You're on the path. It's not so much about the destination, it's about the baby steps you take to get there. So with that, if you have any questions about sporadic thoughts, if you're struggling with sporadic thoughts and you've been wanting to work with a therapist and you feel like I might be the right fit, please always send me a message. I'm here to answer any of your questions. This is a no pressure situation. It's got to feel right to you as always. I'm not here to try and sell you on anything. I'm simply here to offer you an opportunity and an invitation to explore if it's the right fit for you. But if it's something you're struggling with, please let me know. Drop a comment below and let our other community members know, hey, this is happening to me too. Here's what I've got going on here, some of my sporadic thoughts, and let's support one another. But with that, thank you so much for joining me. As always, thank you for being a part of this community, and I will absolutely see you next time. See you later.